Algiers, a large city on the Mediterranean coast steeped in history, has withstood centuries and for the last 130 years, French rule. However, as the middle of the 20th century dawns, old and new grievances have transformed French Algeria from a forcibly subdued part of France into a territory seething with rebellion and violence, and the city of Algiers becomes its very focal point. To many Muslim Algerians, one thing is clear: freedom can only come through violence.
Welcome to Season 1 of TimeGhost Cold War coverage in our series War to War, where we cover the events of the decade after World War II that brought man from the brink of destruction to the threshold of the stars. I'm Spartacus Olsson.
And I am Sebastian Brandstetter. A couple of episodes ago, we covered the origins of the Algerian War. So for a deeper look at how we got where we are now, check out that episode.
But here's a quick recap of how the Algerian War transforms into a precursor of modern urban guerrilla warfare, counterinsurgency, and counter-revolution.
France has held Algeria since 1830, not just as a colony, but later legally as part of France. Its north divided into départements, like in metropolitan France. On paper, it's France. In reality, conquest, massacres, land theft, and fake assimilation leave a privileged settler minority and a Muslim majority treated as second class in their own country.
After two world wars in which hundreds of thousands of Muslim Algerians fought for France, hopes for change erupted on VE Day 1945. In Sétif, a nationalist march is met with gunfire, and the brutal repression that kills thousands convinces many that reform is dead and only violent struggle for independence remains.
From this emerged the Front de Libération Nationale, the FLN. And on the 31st October to 1st November 1954, they launched coordinated attacks across Algeria, beginning the war.
Their goal is not military victory, but visibility and internationalization through the new UN. A gamble that worked when Algeria reached the UN agenda in September 1955, and France stormed out in protest.
Meanwhile, the Philippeville killings of August 1955 only hardened French resolve and opinion, and the reprisals were brutal. Then, in early 1956, Pied Noir settlers helped crush reform in the Day of Tomatoes. Paris responded with special powers, and by mid-1956, French troop levels in Algeria reached about 400,000.
And that is how we get to the 30th of September 1956, when female FLN operatives slip past checkpoints and place bombs, with numerous explosions rocking the European quarters of Algiers. At this point, the FLN and even France's allies have no idea that these bombings are the heralds of citywide terror.
Why does the FLN suddenly change tack and focuses on operation in Algiers and not across the whole of Algeria? Abane Ramdane, one of the key leaders of the FLN, explains.
The brothers know that our inferiority to the colonialist army in men and material does not permit us to win great and decisive military victories. Is it preferable for our cause to kill 10 enemies in some riverbed in Terrorism, which no one will talk about, or rather a single one in Algiers, which the American press will report the next day? Though we are taking some risks, we must make our struggle known. Directive number 9, fall 1956.
So, from the FLN side, Algiers is chosen as grounds for a battle of ideas as much as a battle of arms. The French might not know this, or simply do not care, but they do not stand idly by while what they consider to be a city in France descends into revolutionary violence.
In response, Minister-Resident Robert Lacoste clamps down on the FLN and clamps down hard. As more bombings and targeted assassinations rock Algiers towards the end of 1956, Algerian nationalists are now routinely guillotined.
The Pied Noirs have grown resentful, and by now any Muslim is suspect to violence, specifically after the assassination of Amandé Froger, the mayor of Boufarik and hardline Pied Noir leader on December 28, 1956, triggers reprisals against Muslim Algerians, leading to 8 deaths and 48 injuries. The police are stretched to their very limits, and Algiers is entirely out of control.
And there is more Lacoste has to ponder. The FLN has announced that on January 28, 1957, right when Algeria is supposed to appear on the UN's agenda again, a general strike will be called.
That is why on January 4th, 1957, Lacoste and his panic-stricken cabinet concede defeat. Simply put, the civilian tools in his arsenal do not suffice.
Just 3 days later, on January 7th, General Jacques Massu, commander of the elite 10th Paratrooper Division, receives full police powers.
On a purely tactical level, Lacoste's decision meant that, virtually for the first time in the 2 years of war, France was accepting the FLN's challenge, confronting it with total force and backed by the will to use it.
And Lacoste also gives Massu his first orders. The upcoming strike has to be broken, at all costs and by any means.
On the 8th of January, right as his reign begins, Massu starts with mass arrests, rounding up some 950 suspects just in the initial sweeps, a decisive blow against the FLN in Algiers.
But why does the FLN even plan to conduct a general strike, a peaceful form of protest along its campaign of bombings and assassinations? Again, it is because of the international visibility it could create, as the UN is about to deliberate on Algeria.
However, as historian Alistair Horn puts it, it was to turn out to be perhaps the FLN's gravest tactical error of the entire war.
By the evening of the 27th, Algiers is already a dead city. By Monday morning, the sprawling metropolis stands still. The vast majority of Muslim shops remain shuttered. Essential public services are hamstrung to the point of ceasing to exist, and Muslim schoolchildren stay at home.
For a brief moment, in Kasbah, it seems the strike is a complete success. Kasbah is the labyrinthine old Ottoman quarter of the city and one of the most densely populated quarters in the world, housing on the order of 100,000 people in about 1 square kilometer. Just to give some context, that's roughly 3.5 times the population density of Manhattan today and about 2.5 times denser than even Paris' most crowded district.
Its twisting paths and winding streets make it the ideal headquarters for evasion and insurgency, and that's right where the FLN has set up shop. Under the firm hand of Youssef Saidi, by now, Kasbah has been transformed into a fortress of sorts.
Using strong armed tactics, Youssef cleansed it of criminals and the MNA, a rival more moderate independence faction. He made sure that nothing moved without his knowledge. He transformed the topography of the Kasbah, creating an elaborate underground world of secret passages, safe houses, concealed rooms, and hidden bomb-making factories.
But back to the strike. In the morning hours of Monday the 28th, the drone of helicopters can be heard above the quarter as leaflets are dropped and army jeeps proclaim the same message: get back to work.
Since this does not have the effect Massu hoped for, he takes the next step. Throwing the entire 10th Paratrooper Division at Algiers, armored vehicles pull up and simply rip the shutters off of closed shops. Behind the destroyed shutters await
Oranges, bananas, honey cakes, jars of multicolored sweets. Urchins playing in the street rushed forward, helping themselves, and took flight.
The shopkeepers, now forced to come out to protect their merchandise, face a choice: stay open or be imprisoned. Elsewhere, even more drastic measures are taken. Reportedly, in the outskirts of Algiers, Colonel Antoine Argout orders a tank to fire a round directly into closed shutters, wounding one of his own men, but effectively breaking the striking spirit.
Then Massu dispatches a fleet of trucks to collect strikers at their homes and forcibly bring them back to work. Again, the choice is simple: cooperate or be arrested. This procedure is repeated the next day. Thus, the strike crumbles away by midweek.
While it may have ended, the 10th Paratroopers and Massu have just begun. In the weeks after assuming control, Massu's 4 Paratrooper Regiment arrived piecemeal in the city.
Algiers has now been split into 4 sectors, and a regiment is assigned to each. The system is called quadrillage. Kasbah, the heart of FLN resistance, is cordoned off. Armed checkpoints have been placed at all exits and house-to-house searches have begun.
Intelligence has also been centralized. Massu is aware that the FLN currently enjoys a sizable advantage here. So, already on the evening of his takeover, a major is sent to the city's police headquarters. He sternly demands that any and all files, dossiers, and any other information on FLL subjects be handed over post-haste.
After poring over the files for 24 hours, lists of suspects for summary arrests are sent to the sectors. And because now the military is in charge, these arrests will be accompanied by none of the judicial formalities of warrants or preferring of charges as required by cumbersome civil procedure.
This allows for a ruthlessness and speed that would otherwise be impossible. But that's still not all. Massou expands the quadrillage system with the Dispositif de Protection Urbaine, the Urban Protection System, DPU in short.
The DPU carves up Algiers into further subsectors, blocks, and even single buildings. To each block, a Muslim ancien combattant, a Muslim combat veteran loyal to France, is appointed. They are supposed to keep a close eye and report any suspicious activities to regimental command. This network quickly proves its worth, ensuring, for example, that almost no Muslim was able to enter the European quarters without being reported.
All that does not mean, however, that the nominally pro-French Algeria forces see eye to eye. Just a week into Massou's tenure, the Bazooka affair, in which ORAF, an extremist European pro-Algérie Française network, fires a homemade rocket launcher at General Raoul Salan's HQ, that's Massou's boss, killing his aide. And that shows that some Pied Noir hardliners see Salan as too soft and dream of harder men, hoping for a crisis toppling the Fourth Republic and bringing back General Charles de Gaulle.
Back to power in Paris. That and the strike supercharge an atmosphere already ripe with violence. Massou's frantic determination met with proud defiance intensifies practices that will come to define the Battle of Algiers.
First, what happens to those arrested? Well, people who end up in the hands of Massou's men simply disappear into detention centers without any trail, and that is not unintentional.
It's a standard instrument of the system. By April 1957, Massou even explicitly orders that absolute secrecy be maintained regarding the number and identities of arrestees. This dials up the terror experienced by the local Muslim population, again, intentionally.
Now, torture of detainees was already used before Massou took over, but under his leadership, it becomes an institution. Massou will later claim that it was necessary to gather needed information. Basically, the ends justify the means. No matter that France co-drafted, supported, and voted for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which explicitly bans torture in Article 5.
And while torture is unquestionably vile, whatever the method, the 10th paratroopers turned their creativity into an instrument of brutality. Detainees are hauled in by the thousands, kept hungry, immobilized, and humiliated, sometimes injected with pentothal, truth serum, on arrival, although many FLN cadres are trained to resist it.
Then comes the toolkit. The GGN is the workhorse. A field magneto sending electric shocks through clips on ears, tongues, temples, and especially genitals because it's quick and leaves few marks. Water torture takes prisoners to the edge of drowning. Beatings are routine and methodical. Souls flayed, bodies worked over, organs targeted. Loisette Iglaris, still in a cast from capture, remembers her interrogator prodding under the plaster into raw, shattered bone to cause indescribable pain. And
sexual violence is not a side note, but a targeted weapon against women and men alike, leveraging religious taboos. Jamila Boupacha describes rape and violation with a bottleneck. At Lambès, an infamous detention center, inmate Amor is tortured with his genitals crushed while a broom handle is forced into him. Across testimonies, the pattern is unmistakable. Electricity, near drowning, beatings, and sexual assault fused into one machinery of terror.
Under this regime of coercion, survival itself becomes part of the arithmetic. Some detainees talk, many don't, and a significant number simply never come back out. In the course of roughly a year, an estimated 24,000 Muslim residents of Algiers are arrested and pushed through military internment centers, about a tenth of the city's Muslim population. In the Kashfa alone, something like 30 to 40% of adult men pass through the dragnet at one stage or another. Between 3,000 and 4,000 Algerians vanish without a trace.
What follows is the next step in the system. Those who are too prominent, too visibly broken, or who refuse to talk are removed under euphemisms, wood-gathering parties, transfers, sudden escapes, and their deaths are filed as the result of escape attempts or suicides.
Larbi Ben Mhidi, co-founder of the FLN and head of its political commission, is captured on the 23rd of February 1957. On the 6th of March, the army announces he has hanged himself in his cell, but later reports confirm torture and execution by a special unit on Massou's direct orders.
Ali Boumengel, an Algerian lawyer and FLN figure arrested the same month, is likewise declared a suicide on the 26th of March. Rumors and testimonies spread of other detainees being quietly eliminated, some dumped into the Bay of Algiers by helicopter before their names can ever return to daylight. Torture is the engine. Disappearance is how the engine's smoke is cleared away.
And while the FLN does not give up, it is forced to change tactics. By late February, early March, the remaining leadership escapes the city, many headed abroad, for instance to Tunis.
As such, by the end of March, Massou and the 10th paratroopers have won a tactical victory. FLN in Algiers lies fatally weakened, and the urban terrorism recedes. However, the FLN is recovering. In the shadows and ruins, Youssef Saidi is slowly rebuilding uprooted networks in the Kasbah, totally isolated and readying for a renewed offensive.
However, the French aren't the only enemies the FLN has to deal with. On the 29th of May, at Melouza, FLN forces, Milaja III, brutally murder many inhabitants of a village loyal to the rival MNA nationalist movement. This sign of internecine conflict within the independence movement is seized upon by pro-French press as proof of the FLN's brutality and authoritarianism.
Then, on June 9th, the FLN deems itself ready for the renewed offensive in Algiers. That day, a powerful bomb devastates the Casino de la Corniche, claiming another 9 victims and injuring 85, mostly European.
Massou answers with even more violence. This is the second Battle of Algiers, the first ending with his tactical victory in March, even though in reality it's one almost year-long continuous struggle rather than 2 neat battles.
To crush the FLN a second time, Massou adds more intelligence tactics, the Bleu. In Massou's torture chambers and detention camps, they work on some of the prisoners. Demoralized by the defeat, some of them are turned and sent back out to infiltrate the FLN as double agents.
Through these methods, the paratroopers chalked up success after success. On the 26th of August, 2 of Youssef's key operatives, Murat and Kamel, were pinned down and killed.
With their deaths, the path to the elusive Youssef stands open, and he is captured by the paratroopers a month later on September 24th. Whereas the FLN in the capital only stood crippled in March, now it stands beheaded.
But one possible new leader is still at large, Ali La Pointe. He is the last remaining high-profile FLN operative in Algiers, and he has been at the top of Massou's most wanted list for months. In December 1956, he was likely the one who killed Amandé Froger, the hardline mayor, and was one of Youssef's most trusted lieutenants.
By October 8th, the paratroopers have cornered him in a safe house at 5 Rue de Abderrahim. La Pointe, together with his companions, including the 12-year-old courier Petit Omar, refuses 3 calls for surrender.
So, hollow charges are used to reduce the house to cinders. Their explosive force so great that another 17 Muslim Algerians, mostly teenagers, are killed in the surrounding buildings. The paratroopers dig through the rubble until his corpse is found.
On his chest, he had tattooed, "Go forward or die." Marche ou crève, and on his foot, shut up, ta gueule. Exhortations which he followed to the end.
With his death, the Battle of Algiers ends for good, with a complete and undeniable French tactical victory. But that very victory, or rather how it was achieved, will cost France the war.
That is the paradox of Algiers. Algiers shows that a city can be seized street by street, house by house, and still be lost where it matters most: legitimacy. The victory in Algiers and the campaigns in broader Algeria don't just break the FLN's network, they break France's political position at home and abroad, in a way that no tactical success can repair.
In Algerian scholarship, the Battle of Algiers is not remembered as a defeat in arms, but as a crucial political victory. The Kasbah's obstinate resistance becomes a bright flame of collective dignity under colonial repression. The population does not break, and the French dismantle cells without extinguishing the refusal that sustains the struggle. What Algiers proves, in that reading, is that Algérie française can be enforced by fear, but never made acceptable, and the gap between control and consent is fatal.
That is also why Algiers becomes the prototype for modern urban conflict. It compresses the whole asymmetrical logic into one city. Insurgent terror calibrated for political effect, total counterinsurgency transplanted into a dense urban slum, and a war fought through images and propaganda and human rights language as much as through bullets. Tactical control turns out to be secondary to the moral story told about how that control was achieved.
The shockwaves of Massou's terror eventually reach Paris, London, Washington, Moscow, and beyond. While the army was granted a carte blanche, when the abuses leak into the press and into UN deliberations, the French government refuses to accept responsibility for their orders. French and Pied Noir officers, meanwhile, draw the opposite lesson, that only they can decide Algeria's fate.
The result is a political crisis that the Fourth Republic cannot contain. In February 1958, the bombing of Sakiet Sidi Youssef in Tunisia triggers unanimous international condemnation and forces humiliating, at least for Paris, Anglo-American mediation. The French government falls in April, and on May 13, 1958, settlers and officers in Algiers revolt, demanding Charles de Gaulle's return.
And de Gaulle does return. Welcome back as a savior of Algérie française, and he revamps the constitution, ushering in the Fifth French Republic. But Algiers has already set the limits of that project. Faced with a war whose political and moral costs keep compounding, he will pivot towards self-determination, and step by step, the road to independence in 1962.
In the aftermath of independence, peace is not what follows, at least immediately. The Haqqis and Muslim French loyalists pay the price for their betrayal. Independence will see thousands, tens of thousands die. The numbers are disputed, with estimates ranging from 10 to 100,000.
Algeria, like many other colonial struggles of the time, shows that the age of empire has ended, and specifically that the French spin on colonialism, assimilation, was doomed to fail from the get-go.
While nice in theory, the reality of a two-class society rendered assimilation nothing more than a fever dream of French colonialists, even if it possibly was informed by Republican ideals.
In the end, the Algerian War exposes not a tragic misunderstanding, but a colonial order sustained by institutionalized torture and rule at gunpoint. France wins its battle reports but shreds its claim to universal values. The FLN's Algeria will be violent, fractured, and far from ideal, yet it is the only future millions can imagine as dignified.
In that sense, the road to independence in 1962 marks the moment when Algérie française dies and the age of the French Empire can no longer pretend to be anything other than a brutal colonial machinery of exploitation and suffering, although it will take until 2018 for France to acknowledge as much.
If you want to join our cause of exploring history, become part of the TimeGhost army and join on timeghost.tv or patreon.com.
Excelsior!